The movie begins and we see a teenager named Ensu riding a train really late at night. Despite the time, he's in his school uniform, busily sketching a picture of his mother while talking to her on the phone. He's holding onto a peculiar beaded necklace with a metal disc in the center with one hand. During the call, he assures his mother that everything's okay, emphasizing that he's not causing any trouble with other kids at school. It's evident they haven't met for quite some time. And Ensu has a history of not quite getting along with his peers. Ensu also mentions to his mother that he no longer sees ghosts, and even if he did, he wouldn't be frightened by them. However, his attention is diverted by a commotion caused by a drunk girl across the train carriage. She's having a loud argument on the phone and appears visibly upset. Ensu ends his call and notices the disc on his necklace spinning rapidly, sending a chilling sensation down his spine. When he looks back at the drunk girl, he spots a long-haired ghost whispering in her ear. The ghost looks frightening, and Ensu tries his best to keep his eyes away from it. Soon, 3 of his schoolmates show up there and start teasing him. Ensu is uncomfortable and flinches when they make fun of him for supposedly seeing ghosts. His ability to see spirits has made it tough for him to fit in, forcing him to change schools frequently. He tries to deny what his classmates are saying, fearing that the female ghost might find out about his unique side. He tells the boys that what they have heard is not true and that they shouldn't believe in such stories. All the while, he keeps his sight away from the ghost. As the train screeches to a stop, Ensu's classmates and the drunk girl leave, leaving Ensu alone in the train carriage with the ghost. He senses an odd feeling at the back of his neck, and when he raises his head, he finds the ghost sitting face to face right in front of him. Later, as Ensu makes his way home from the station, he clutches the necklace anxiously, using it as a sort of tool to detect anything paranormal around him. Upon entering his apartment, a sense of relief washes over him, believing he left any ghosts behind. But that assumption turns out to be wrong. The boy starts feeling strange, and much to his shock, the same ghost from the train is now perched on his shoulders, pleading for his help to relieve her grudge. As dawn breaks, a team of police officers discovers the body of the female ghost in a desolate area, thanks to the information Ensu provided while guided by the ghost's direction. However, the ghost is unprepared to witness her lifeless body, unleashing a torrent of horrified howls and cries. Unable to cope with the immense grief and pain that interacting with ghosts cause, Ensu makes a difficult call to his less-than-ideal uncle, expressing his desire to live with him. However, his uncle, who shares the same ability to see ghosts, warns Ensu against the decision, fearing that their combined abilities would attract more ghosts than they already do. He tells him that it is better for them to live separately, but Ensu has made up his mind. He tells his uncle that he couldn't bear all these unwanted advances of ghosts, and has already put in a request for school transfer, thus nothing else can be done. His uncle grumbles and expresses his dissatisfaction over his decision. He tells him that it is because despite his uncle's advice to ignore the ghost, warning that they'll persistently seek his help if they know about his ability, Ensu kept granting them favors. Meanwhile, as he speaks to his uncle, a young boy's ghost stands nearby and fixes his attention on Ensu. Later on, Ensu packs up his bags and boards a bus to the town where his uncle lives. Turns out, he is residing in Ensu's parents' house. On the way there, he sees the ghost of a girl in a school uniform who captures his attention. As he gazes at her, she catches his eye and offers a smile in his direction. Nervous, Ensu quickly averts his gaze, not wanting to attract any unwanted attention. That morning, Ensu finally arrives at his house where he is greeted by his uncle. He comes out and cautiously looks all around Ensu before ushering him in and firmly closing the door behind him. He does all this to make sure that no spirit follows the boy into the house and torments them. The house is adorned with various talismans intended to ward off spirits, and a prominently displayed photo of his great-grandfather, a renowned exorcist. It turns out that the necklace Ensu possesses once belonged to his great-grandfather. Sitting down for tea, Ensu and his uncle engage in conversation. He asks his uncle if he still doesn't go out, and the older man replies by saying that he is agoraphobic, fearful of leaving the house due to his tendency to attract ghosts. Ensu, however, is skeptical because he knows that the real reason he refuses to go out is due to a peculiar incident his mother mentioned. It was when his uncle was supposedly possessed by a ghost and ended up in a women's bathhouse. Poor man must have had the embarrassment of his life. Ensu himself had attempted to live in the US with his mother in an attempt to escape the ghosts, but it was all for nothing. He could still see them there, and it was even more difficult due to his inability to understand the language, which hindered his communication with ghosts. The next day, following this settling-in period, Ensu heads to school. His new teacher introduces him to the class, emphasizing the importance of being kind. On the right corner of the class, one chair seems free, and the girl sitting in the next row behind the chair, named Yoonji, tells the teacher that he can sit there. As he settles down, Yoonji asks the boy sitting beside him to change seats and comes over to sit beside him. She introduces herself and provocatively touches his hand, displaying a particular interest in Ensu, but he deflects her advances. As the class focuses on the lesson, all of a sudden, Ensu is startled when he sees a bloody hand banging on the classroom window. Later that night, Ensu confides in his uncle about the disturbing sight of the bloody hand. His uncle explains that such a haunting image signifies a particularly gruesome manner of the ghost's demise, thus, the grudge would be extremely high. When he asks his uncle what he should do, his uncle strictly tells him to stay away. The following day, during lunch break, Ensu seeks a quiet moment to sketch a blind woman and a ghostly dog, which only he can see. It's then that the girl he noticed on his arrival in town appears before him, initially attempting to ignore her, and Sue soon realizes she can see through his facade. She watches his sketch and tells him that the dog that sits before the girl is not visible to just anyone. Since he can see the dog, he can see her too. All of a sudden, Yoonji's companions named Hee-chol and Kai-ti confront Sue and drag him to a more isolated part of the park. They're furious, accusing him of stealing Yoonji's affection. Despite Su's attempts to clarify his lack of interest in Yoonji, Hee-chol becomes more enraged and physically assaults Sue, violently throwing him to the ground. He leans in, revealing that he attended elementary school with Sue years ago. He's aware of Su's peculiar fixation on their missing classmate named Young, a situation that occurred when Sue was in elementary school. In a flashback, it's disclosed that years ago, a student named Young went missing and Sue started seeing her ghost. She persistently claimed she had, leading Sue to disclose the location of her body to the authority. Hee-chol, aware of this history, uses it as leverage, threatening Sue to stay away from Yoonji or risk having his ability exposed to the entire school. The two boys leave after abandoning the poor boy lying there. He wasn't even interested in the girl in the first place. Later that night, in an abandoned shed, someone viciously slapped the dog, leaving behind the animal's collar and a photograph of a young student. The following day, the girl in the photo, known as Seong-hee, walks home from school feeling an eerie sensation that someone is watching her. She speaks to her mother over the phone, visibly concerned about her missing dog named Coral. It is the same dog that was cruelly slaughtered last night. Shortly after, Yoonji and another girl named Nara surprise her, intending it as a prank, but Seong-hee is far from amused. She chastises the two for pulling such a nonsense prank and clutches at her rapidly beating heart. Together they set off back to their respective homes. Upon arriving home to an empty apartment, Seong-hee hears a loud noise, prompting her to investigate. She discovers a small plastic bag hanging from her ceiling. Curious, she walks towards it to see a strange scarlet liquid dripping down. Just below the bag, on the floor, the name tag of her missing dog is lying. The situation escalates when the bag abruptly bursts, dousing Seong-hee in blood. Startled, she rushes to the sink to clean her face and grabs a knife for protection. She then calls her friend Nara and starts rambling on about how the ghost of a girl named Se-hee is here for her. Nara, however, can't seem to hear her friend properly. However, all of a sudden, before she could escape, the door shuts behind her, trapping her inside. At school, Yoonji informs Hee-chol that she believes Seong-hee ran away from home once more. Meanwhile, Sue spots the girl ghost again. He keeps ignoring her, but after hearing that she would not be asking him to relieve any of her grudges, he finally pays attention. It turns out that the girl does not know her name, nor does she know what she did or where she studied. She has been pestering him because she is bored and has no one else to talk with. In their presence, Hee-chol bullies another student on the soccer field. This upsets the ghost girl, who questions why Sue doesn't intervene against the bullies. Before Sue can answer, suddenly, she notices the presence of an entity called the Mask and flees in terror. Sue also notices some strange presence and, using his pendant, tracks it to a storage room. There he comes across a female ghost and locks eyes, but quickly feigns ignorance and departs. Meanwhile, in a different part of town, Seong-hee lies bound and gagged on the floor. A loud banging on the door startles her, prompting a piercing scream. All of a sudden, the door bangs open and nothing but her screams can be heard. Outside, we see the silhouette of a person standing. That night, Sue confides in his uncle about his regrets regarding not standing up to bullies in the past and even now. He says that just like everyone else, he also doesn't care if anyone gets bullied. He then reminisces about the past and believes that had he spoken out earlier, Ah-hyung's assailant might have been apprehended sooner. However, his uncle consoles him, reminding Sue that he was just a child at the time and did what he could. Moreover, he too was a victim and ended up getting shunned by the townsfolk. This led him to abandon his village too. The next day, Sue and the ghost girl visit the blind girl who sits by the tree with the soul of her dog. They tell her how her deceased dog's soul is near her, and the woman gets extremely happy hearing this. Strangely, the girl can even hear the ghost girl's voice and mistakenly calls her Sue's girlfriend. After that, the two take a walk and Sue admits to the ghost girl that Ah-hyung's ghost was the first one that he saw. Back then, the ghost had revealed the identity of her assailant, but he was too afraid to disclose the truth, leading to him and his mother leaving town. This has always been Sue's deepest shame. And now he gathers the courage to speak with Young's family. He apologizes to her father for not having the courage to identify the assailant back then, but the father reassures Sue that he understands he did his best. He acknowledges that revealing the location of their daughter's body was already a significant contribution. With tears in his eyes, he is grateful to the couple and also sees a Young's ghost cheerfully saying her farewell. It seems as though she was waiting for him to come. All the while, the ghost girl stays beside him, sharing in his pain and heartache. In the aftermath of Sue's interaction with Ah-hyung's father, and the departure of Ah-hyung's ghost, a sense of closure settles within Sue. He finds solace in spending more time with the nameless ghost girl, their companionship gradually blossoming into a deeper connection. The next day at school, with growing courage, Sue stands up to Yoonji, finally taking a stand against her bullying tactic. This bold move marks a pivotal shift in Sue's demeanor, showcasing a positive change in his personality. Back at home, Sue sketches more portraits of the ghost girl while his uncle grapples with the persistent presence of a ghostly woman who remains silent, unwilling to disclose the unresolved matters tying her to the earthly realm. His frustration mounts as he tries in vain to discern the spirit's lingering concerns. But when Insu contemplates out loud about the identity of the mask, the previously quiet ghost suddenly speaks. She reveals that the entity behind the mask is Seihi. Both the nephew and uncle are lost since they do not know who Seihi is. Uncle tries to ask the ghost about what Seihi's grudge is, but it is in vain. She only repeats the same sentence about how the mask is Seihi herself. In the meantime, back at school, an event unfolds involving Nara, an associate of the bullies, and Kai-T sneaking into the school premises under the veil of night. They stealthily attempt to retrieve her phone, stowed away in a teacher's drawer. They then enter their classroom where Kai-T waits while Nara goes to the restroom. However, their covert mission takes a chilling turn when the mask gruesomely dispatches Kai-T before menacingly advancing toward Nara. Confronted by the ghostly visage of Seihi, Nara frantically rushes out to search for Kai-T. Back in the classroom, he is nowhere to be seen. All of a sudden, she hears noise from outside and approaches the door, only to be met with a horrifying sight. The injured body of Kai-T slammed onto it. In her panic, she contacts Yoonji, alarmed and seeking refuge from the haunting presence. But the mask ultimately silences Nara as well, adding to the sinister incidents occurring within the school's premises. The next day, in the wake of these disturbing events, school staff become increasingly apprehensive, realizing the troubling pattern of student disappearances that have been occurring recently. The air is thick with worry and fear as the mystery surrounding these unsettling occurrences deepens. Although they are thinking that these students just ran away, there is still too little evidence to believe that. Meanwhile, Yoonji is visibly shaken after receiving the distressing message from Nara. However, her surprise grows when she overhears Insu inquiring about Seihi from their classmates. Insu wants to see a picture of Seihi, but he only manages to discover that Seihi had taken. When Insu asks for pictures of Seihi, Yoonji abruptly ends their conversation, explaining that nobody took pictures with Seihi due to her difficult personality. Later, while Insu is spending time with the ghost girl, a compassionate student secretly sends Insu a picture of Seihi. He sees the picture and then turns to the ghost girl, seeking more details about Seihi's past. The ghost's expression turns melancholic, revealing that everyone in the school knows the reasons behind Seihi's passing and why her ghost wanders veiled in a mask. That is exactly why nobody was curious about her passing. In a bold move, Insu confronts Yoonji and Heechul about their involvement in Seihi's tragedy. He blames them for the girl's passing and tells them to come clean, or else the spirit of Seihi will come for them to avenge herself. When they refuse to admit, he cautions them that she's seeking retribution and will hold them accountable. Heechul snaps and beats him senseless until Yoonji shouts at him to stop. Struggling with a growing sense of guilt, Yoonji confides in Heechul about her theory based on a photo found on her phone, depicting the assailant alongside one of the missing girls. She suspects that Seihi's father might be responsible for the disappearances, seeking revenge for the torment his daughter endured. Recalling the father's angry gaze during the funeral, she and Heechul plan to confront him at his house. They believe it might shed light on the unsettling events unfolding within their community. Insu comes back home and reveals to his uncle how the mask might have more than one face or appearance. In the wake of Insu's revelations, his uncle surmises that the mask may be a manifestation of the ghost's split personalities, a result of the traumatic demise. He says that perhaps the pain was too much to bear, thus, the ghost developed such personalities as a coping mechanism. He says that the vengeful ghost must be stopped from doing all these things, but concerned for Insu's safety, the uncle advises against his involvement. Just then, Insu receives a text from Yoonji saying that they are at Seihi's house. Feeling resolute about helping Seihi, Insu decides to head over. Before Insu heads out, his uncle equips him with one of their great-grandfather's exorcism daggers. It's a solemn but necessary gesture meant to protect Insu as he delves into the unknown. Back at Seihi's father's property, Yoonji and Heechul venture into the darkened shed. The door suddenly locks behind them. Scared, they catch glimpses of the masked ghost and their flashlights start malfunctioning. Meanwhile, Insu also arrives at the place and hears Yoonji's screams. Back inside, as the tension mounts, Seihi's father enters and stealthily strikes Heechul, inflicting a fatal blow to his head. In the midst of this horrific ordeal, Yoonji is left cowering in a corner, witnessing the terrifying masked figure of Seihi's father. It is not too late before she too falls victim to the grieving father's savagery. As she is attacked, she sees the apparition of Seihi inside her father's figure. Back outside, Insu hears the commotion and rushes to the shed, arriving too late to save his classmates. He sees Seihi's father leaving with a bewildered look on his face. As Insu enters the shed, a dreadful scene unfolds before him. All the rotting bodies of the bullies line one wall. On the other side, there is a closet. He approaches it and finds the corpse of the mask, revealing a shocking truth. Seihi is actually the ghost he had befriended, and the mask and Seihi are the same tormented entity. The haunting truth behind Seihi's torment is revealed through a series of harrowing flashbacks. Seihi, initially reporting Yoonji for her bullying, but faced a vicious retaliation when Yoonji discovered her identity. Yoonji, along with her cohorts Chol, Ki, Nara, and Sung, subjected Seihi to relentless cruelty. They burned her with a lighter, forcibly cut her hair, and ultimately enforced the mandate that she wear a white mask at all times under the threat of dire consequences. Days passed as Seihi suffered the relentless torment, with their classmates mere spectators to the ongoing cruelty. Seihi's father, alarmed by his daughter's suffering, contemplated seeking help from the authorities. However, Se-hee, fearing further retribution from the bullies, asked her father not to take any action. Tragically, when the suffering became unbearable, Se-hee took in the afterlife. Her ghost fragmented into two distinct personalities. The gentle Se-hee, whom In-soo befriended, and the vengeful and terrifying Mask, set on retribution against the tormentors. Furthermore, she possessed her father, compelling him to carry out the acts of retribution while the Mask haunted the bullies in their final moments. Back to the present, In-soo stands in Se-hee's room, looking over her belongings. There he finds a diary where she has jotted down the names of people she wants to take out. All have been crossed except one. In a rush, In-soo rushes back to the school so that he may be able to save at least the last one. In a desperate attempt to mitigate the situation, he contacts his uncle, urging him to overcome his agoraphobia and perform a ritual to banish the ghost to the afterlife, as he's the only one aware of the necessary process. Meanwhile, back at the school, the Mask, far from completing her revenge, possesses their teacher. In-soo, aware of the unfolding danger, rushes to the school, realizing the imminent threat. He arrives at the school just as the Mask cuts the electricity and traps her former classmates inside the library. The Mask-possessed teacher is then about to ignite the room with gasoline, preparing to cause a catastrophic fire. Amid the looming danger, the kind spirit of Se-hee appears, striving to halt the Mask's destructive plan. However, the Mask's malevolent force overpowers Se-hee's good-natured ghost, causing her to vanish. Simultaneously, In-soo's uncle reaches the shed adorned in their great-grandfather's exorcism gear. He seizes Se-hee's dormant ghost and initiates the ritual, wielding their great-grandfather's sword to attempt to banish the spirit. Back at the school, after In-soo manages to subdue the teacher, the Mask takes possession of one of the students, shrouding their identity. In a tense moment, In-soo resorts to using his necklace, utilizing it as a sort of GPS ghost detector. Swinging the necklace around the room, the disc vibrates, guiding In-soo to the possessed individual. This action forces the Mask to reveal herself. She has now possessed the girl that she helped when she was being bullied, and the reason she got into such a tragic end. As a last resort, In-soo shows the Mask a sketchbook, unveiling a deeply buried memory. As In-soo reminisces about the significant memory from his elementary school days, he vividly recalls the instance when a young Se-hee courageously stood up for him against bullies, offering him a reassuring reminder to stay resilient. This recollection prompts the reappearance of the kind-hearted Se-hee's ghost. However, this brief interlude of solace is abruptly interrupted as the malevolent Mask reclaims control, plunging the situation back into turmoil. Simultaneously, In-soo's uncle meticulously executes the ritual, wielding the sword to complete the ceremonial process, aiming to separate Se-hee's spirit from her physical form. Meanwhile, In-soo and the Mask tightly hold the lighter, fighting for its possession. All of a sudden, the kind-hearted Se-hee appears and grabs the ancient dagger from In-soo's pocket, plunging it in. With tears streaming down her face, Se-hee says her farewell and finally crosses over to the afterlife in peace. Sometimes later, In-soo, along with all the school kids, hold a peaceful funeral for Se-hee. Fast forward to 5 years later. The local school undergoes a remarkable transformation, evolving into a space free from the violence and bullying. In-soo, having matured and prepared himself to embark on a new journey as a teacher, takes on his first day at the very high school where he graduated. However, as he begins to introduce himself to the class, a spectral figure of a student ominously approaches him, signifying that his encounters with spirits and the responsibilities of exercising are far from over. Poor man can't catch a break.